Hello and welcome to the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. It's good to be back here. I took all last week off. At first, I was just to take Monday off, not do the Raw review, just to rest from the Royal Rumble. But it turns out I needed a whole week of rest because I came down with a really bad cold right after the Rumble pay-per-view and laid my ass out. I checked, it was not COVID, but thank you all for your well wishes on social media when I said that I was out sick. I appreciate your patience as I had to take Raw and the Wednesday shows and SmackDown off, but I've been spending all week resting up. I've been taking throat lozenges, drinking some throat coat tea. That's throat coat tea. It coats your throat, and I feel like I'm in good enough shape to come back and start recording again. Still have a bit of a cough, but besides that, though, I feel generally healthy besides that. And with that, let's begin. The show opens up with Adam Pearce and a returning Shane McMahon. The two of them together make a blockbuster announcement regarding the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, and the main event will be a championship match as Drew McIntyre defends against 5 former WWE champions. They are Sheamus, Jeff Hardy, The Miz, AJ Styles, and Randy Orton. And I'm like, okay, so we just had the Royal Rumble match where 30 dudes really try to kill each other for a shot at a title match at WrestleMania, but for 5 of those people who are in the match, you also get this free championship match at Elimination Chamber. You did nothing to earn. So I thought that was a little interesting they would do that. Make it make sense. Why would you have all that trouble in the Rumble match, then just give 5 dudes a shot automatically? No qualifying matches or nothing. I know the turnaround time between now and the pay-per-view is relatively short, but I feel you could have still added a couple matches to, have the stakes involved with that match. Then AJ Styles and Omos make their way to the ring, and AJ with kind of a backhanded compliment to Pearce for making the match, saying, I thought you were kind of a dumbass. And then Jeff Hardy comes out and they're about to have their match. But going back to the announcement itself, I get, forcing these themed pay-per-views to be where they are kind of is a consequence of this, but what a soulless build to the Elimination Chamber match, which is historically this brutal, deathly, destructive match. It's like, we're just gonna throw these guys into it, and here you go, like no grudge or nothing. And it's just like, just felt like kind of, I feel you could have, and they're probably going to build it for Mania, but I think that just, have Drew and Sheamus in the singles match at the Chamber, and then have the number 1 contendership be decided in the Chamber, or put Sheamus in that match and have him win, or something. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone in that regard. It doesn't seem that difficult to book, but my biggest question about this is, what was the point of Shane McMahon coming back for this one announcement, and then he's done? If they're building him up to have him return and it's going to lead to something down the line, really low-key way to bring him back. We go to that opening match now as AJ Styles takes on Jeff Hardy. Hey, remember that match they did an awful lot on SmackDown last year? Well, it's back in Raw form. The match sees AJ attacking Jeff's leg with some cool big moves occasionally. Jeff comes back with a twist of fate, goes to the Swanton, but he misses, and AJ catches him at the calf crusher for the second time in the match to make Jeff tap out. It was an alright match, but nothing we hadn't seen before. Backstage with Keith Lee warming up for his match when he's greeted by his friend and future opponent for the evening, Riddle. And Riddle talks about how he was beat up by Lashley last week and spent the week getting really toasty and binging Air Bud movies. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. So Riddle says he's just like Air Bud and won't stop until he wins the US Championship. And Keith Lee says, maybe it's time for somebody else to challenge Lashley for the belt, and it might even be he, being Lee. And so Riddle says, may the best man win. Elsewhere backstage, we see Sheamus confronting Adam Pearce about the match announcement. Also forgot to mention Drew was kind of miffed about the announcement as well earlier in the night. But Sheamus says, do you not think I'm a draw? What about this one-on-one match we were promised and everything? And Pearce says, I just want to have the best, biggest match available for the pay-per-view. And he says that he's just like Drew McIntyre, full of empty promises. And the pain he will inflict in the Chamber a week from Sunday is going to be on Pearce's hands. Up next, Kofi Kingston back in action as he and Xavier Woods take on T-Bar and Slapjack of Retribution. Mustafa Ali is on commentary for this one. The whole story is he's dangerous with a live mic, folks. He talks about how the New Day have, they've been to the table, they've eaten at the table multiple times, they've had seconds and thirds. When's Mustafa's time to eat? When's T-Bar's time to eat? And so forth. It's a really good match here. Mustafa is barking orders at Retribution as the match goes on. Kofi with a hot tag, and he and Xavier win with Daybreak on Slappy Jack to win their matchup here. It's good stuff. And then afterward, we hear Xavier yelling, "Bring me Reckoning. Where's Reckoning?" I'm just wondering, when's all this losing by Retribution going to pay off and lead to some better storytelling for them? We see Damian Priest and Bad Bunny hanging out backstage. Then we see Ric Flair and Lacey Evans make their way to the ring. By the way, big ups to Flair for the ridiculous ridiculous custom suit he's wearing tonight. Good Lord. Flair on the mic saying he's never taken orders from any woman. Look at his history, he says, especially not from his own daughter. He says his relationship with Lacey is strictly casual. I don't know if he meant that word. Maybe he meant platonic or professional, because casual still implies they're having lots of sex. But he says, oh, if she succumbs to my charms, well, it's not the first time. So basically, he gives a warning to Asuka that Lacey is coming for the women's championship. Lacey says that Charlotte's a disrespectful daughter. Out comes Charlotte Flair, and she says she never said that she didn't want her father's help. Side note, she has said that the first time she healed on her dad, Ric Flair, a couple of years ago. She says she's trying to protect the Flair family legacy and that Rick is risking ruining it because of the way he's acting these days. Evans says they make a great tag team together, but Charlotte's not buying any of it. Says, my tag team partner is Asuka. Sure it is, Charlotte. So anyway, Evans mentions, by the way, that, oh, by the way, if I ever beat you in a match, then I'd be considered for a shot at the women's championship. And Charlotte's like, let's have the match now. And then Lacey jumps her, and just before the break, you hear Lacey do her little laugh, which I love that. So we get that Lacey-Charlotte match up next, and at one point, Lacey tries to go for the strut, but she pays for it, and Charlotte starts right back. At one point, Charlotte goes for a comeback, and she's running into the corner, full sprint, then has to stop, dead in her tracks before she gets there, and there's a whole ass beat before Lacey, oh yeah, I gotta slap her now. Oh, that was so awkward, so hard to watch. The match continues. Lacey goes for a figure four, can't quite figure it out though. Charlotte hits her with a spear, jaw jacks with her dad, then pummels Lacey in the corner until the referee disqualifies her for failing to listen. So finally, Rick gets in between them, and that's that. But we find out that even though Lacey won the match by DQ, she still won the match. So she's getting a title match with Asuka at the pay-per-view, which, you know, that's a nice heel way to do it. I mean, I think that, like, except for Lacey kind of falling backwards into the title match, I have been digging this particular storyline. The match itself, not great, kind of rough to get through, but the storytelling they're doing with the promos and everything beforehand, didn't mind at all. Well, last week, the Men's Rumble winner Edge toured all the big brands from WWE, so now who will he choose as his title opponent for WrestleMania? He says he's unsure now, a little bit torn after the big chamber match announcement, so he's going to wait till the dust settles after the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view to make his announcement, when suddenly The Miz, John Morrison, and Angel Garza, this interesting new trio, come to interrupt, and The Miz tells Edge, even if you somehow make it with the championship at WrestleMania, I'll still be there to swoop in and take it from you with the Money in the Bank briefcase. Edge kind of calls him out for that. Like, why would you give away your strategy to me right to my face? Like, now I'll know who to look for. He knows a thing or two about the Money in the Bank, he says. He also has a great line where he says, so you're content with being awesome. I'm not. I did that 20 years ago. Ooh, solid burn there. So he says he needs to be the champion, and he walks off. We go to our next match now as Garza takes on Damian Priest, who's accompanied by Bad Bunny. And I will say, I took a week off, and I missed all this discourse about what's still going on, so I haven't really missed it, about, ooh, is Bad Bunny really going to help business? Oh, is Bad... Who's heard of Bad Bunny? Who's this Bad Bunny person? Look, I don't know who Bad Bunny is either, but I recognize, like, I've never heard his music, but I recognize he's a top streaming artist, one of the top 10 most listened to artists in the last, like, several years. Kind of a big deal. And I think it's one of the many examples I've seen where, like, you know, wrestling fans are kind of in a bubble where it's like, well, if I've never heard of this person, then surely no one else has. Bad Bunny can't be good for business. And, you know, sometimes wrestling fans can be the worst thing about wrestling. I think this whole Bad Bunny debate is just one example of that. It's a relatively short match. Miz and Morrison try to beat up Priest on the outside, but Bad Bunny intervenes and distracts them with the briefcase that gets Miz and Morrison ejected. Garza's pissed, but he walks right into the reckoning for Priest to win. I think that since associated with Bad Bunny beginning at the Rumble pay-per-view, I think Priest has had a real good look since making the move from NXT to Raw. I think that partnership's going to be good, especially for Priest, introducing a whole bunch of Bad Bunny's fans to him as they head toward WrestleMania. I think that Bad Bunny, as a performer in his limited appearances so far on Raw, I think he's done well in that role as well. We go backstage with the champion Drew McIntyre. He says he does not understand why Sheamus threw away a 20-year friendship last week when he bro kicked him. He could have given him a title match if he wanted, but he's got his theories, but he has to focus on Randy Orton right now. And he says, gosh, all these different things coming against me, suddenly Drew's backed against the wall, right? Well, that's when he's most dangerous, he says. Then after the break, we hear from the Women's Rumble winner, Bianca Belair, and she's asked, has she made a decision about who she's going to face at WrestleMania? And like the Edge promo from earlier, Bianca's very coy about it, not making any kind of statement, when Asuka interrupts and congratulates her on winning the Rumble match, but saying that Bianca is not ready for Asuka. And Bianca says she is ready, and if she takes care of her business with Lacey Evans at the Chamber pay-per-view, you might see more of Belair on Raw. Curious and curiouser. Well, up next, good friends Riddle versus Keith Lee for the first time in WWE at least, an MVP on commentary here representing Bobby Lashley. Lee using his strength multiple times to his advantage here, and great selling by Riddle in this thing. But Riddle does stay alive, hits the floating bro and the final flash, but he gets caught and hit with a spirit bomb by Lee to win. Very good match here. Then afterward, Bobby Lashley comes in. He slams Lee up and down like he was nothing, and then he beats up Riddle some more, goes back to beating up Keith Lee with the stairs, and man, Lashley looks really good here. Last few weeks, he's been looking so dominant. Where was this Lashley when he first came back a few years ago is my big question. And then we find out that at the pay-per-view, these three are going to be in a triple threat match for the championship. Looking forward to it. Well, Randy Orton in his pristine, very much not burned face talks about unfinished business with Drew McIntyre, talks about how much the championship means to him, how he'll regain it at Elimination Chamber, and then we go to a tables match as Nia Jax takes on Lana, the classic storyline from last year, finally revisited here. Nia with two straight big-ass powerbombs to Lana, and at one point has her in the stretch muffler, throwing around like a rag doll and slamming her face first into the turnbuckle. I will say, babyface Lana crying in most of her matches, not a great look. But anyway, she's able to evade a Nia Jax leg drop on the apron, and Nia with the line of the night, screaming in pain, going, "Ow, my hole!" Like, how do you beat that? I had a severe coughing fit when I first heard that, but you know what? I'm not even mad. Lana then shoves Nia and just throws her into a table leaning on the outside to win the match. So once again, by sheer luck and cunning, Lana is able to beat Nia Jax. Then afterwards, Shayna jumps Naomi, and then we have a scuffle, and after the break, we got an impromptu match with these two ladies, Naomi and Shayna Baszler. Kind of a short and sweet match here. The cure-footed clutch is locked in, but Naomi grabs the ropes, and then Shayna stops what she's doing. She goes outside to beat up Lana for a bit, goes back in the ring, and is rolled up by Naomi for Naomi to win. Man, like, champions just cannot win matches on TV, can they? Unless your name's Drew McIntyre, that is. And speaking of Drew Mac, we go to our main event now as he takes on Randy Orton in a non-title match. Moments into the match, though, Sheamus shows up to distract him. It's good back and forth here. I mean, these guys do have a good chemistry, but much like the AJ Styles Jeff Hardy match from earlier, I'm kind of tired of seeing these two wrestle. We saw them do it plenty in 2020. Let's leave that shit in the past. Anyway, in the end, Drew standing over Orton, looks to strike, but suddenly Orton shoves Drew out of the way to take a brogue kick from Sheamus. So the match ends in a DQ, and right after the brogue kick, Drew hits a Claymore on Sheamus and stands tall as we fade to black. Although it was a decent main event to close out the show, even though there was no winner. My biggest question, though, is the moment of Orton shoving Drew out of the way. Like, was that him? Was Drew missing his cue and Orton was just kind of helping him along? Or was there something character-based about that? Which, I don't know if that's the case either, because we just saw Orton cut all these promos about how much he hates himself for not setting Alexa Bliss on fire. So I don't think he'd be so beat up about, oh, I can't believe I allowed Drew to get hit with a brogue kick from behind. Like, that's not his character. So I wonder if there's a deeper meaning to him shoving Drew out of the way, or if I'm reading too much into it. My grade for this week's Raw is a C+. I think there are a couple of interesting storylines going on right now that can go in some pretty interesting directions. I like where they're going with Drew and Sheamus, and I guess the solace I can take from this, chamber matchup announcement that I didn't like is that maybe they're just delaying the inevitable and having Drew and Sheamus for WrestleMania. That makes a lot of sense to me, but in the short term, I'm like, the way they announced that main event seems so cavalier, seems like there's no heft to it. There's no emotional stakes to what we're seeing here in that chamber matchup. I think that overall, the wrestling on this night was good. The biggest fuck up I can think of was just that random moment in Lacey Charlotte where Charlotte has to stop in her tracks before Lacey slaps her. That was really bad, but everything else was fine in terms of wrestling. I think the way they, like I said, the chamber match announcement, totally uninspired, and I think we saw just one too many rematches from frequently recurring storylines and angles we saw the previous year. We're not even that deep into 2021 yet. Let's not just revisit that just yet. But what did you all think of Raw this week? Let me know in the comment section below, and stay tuned for this week's classic pay-per-view review of Armageddon 2000. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.